not to do, but not taught how to not do it. So it's rules first and not actually how to live.
Welcome to an episode of Mental Health America of Central Carolina's new podcast. I am Io Johnson, Executive Director, and I have the pleasure of interviewing this morning my wonderful guest, Chris Jones. Chris has been an advocate and devoted pillar of strength for individuals as well as communities suffering at the grips of substance addiction. Mr. Jones currently works for Carolina Center for Recovery in Charlotte, where we are filming. While introducing a judgment-free space, he implements a collection of therapeutic styles, including, but not limited to, rational emotive, solution-focused, and cognitive behavior therapy. I skipped a word because I couldn't pronounce it. His career as a counselor has cultivated his understanding of the importance of allowing time and grace to repair damaged and traumatic facets of life. Welcome, Chris.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Thank you for supporting our new podcast. And I'm really excited that you're here. We met a little while ago, and I was immediately impressed by your thought process around how we support youth and their mental health. And so I just immediately reached out and said, I would love to have you on my podcast. So thank you. Tell me just a little bit about yourself, your personal mental health story, and how you got into being a counselor.
Well, started about 2019. That's after I got my master's. But before that, I have family members who suffer from substance abuse, as well as mental health. As a child, I was diagnosed with ADHD. So I struggled a bit. But I got into it because I saw there was a huge need for the community, especially where I'm from Durham. So you see a lot of different things. Just being there, growing up there, seeing, people just struggling, I guess, not just financially, but mentally, in school, friends, family. So I went to GCU in Arizona, got my master's, and in 2019, I was given an opportunity at a treatment center in Elizabeth City, which is an area in poverty. And I saw a lot of different things, a lot of different substances, a lot of people struggling in the community, outside the community, from housing to the homeless, to their kids suffering because mom or dad can't do it. Fast forward to now, I came into contact with this guy named Russ at Carolina Center for Recovery, and he gave me an opportunity just to continue to do what I was doing already. My own personal mental health story probably started years ago, but more recently, last year, around August, I was struggling to not go to work heavy. So when I was coming home, I was tired all the time. Didn't really understand what was going on. So sitting in that space of void, I didn't really know what to do. So for counselors, it can be difficult to do what you tell your patients to do. And I didn't realize until after a week. So I was sitting there struggling for a week. So I think either if it was the after service, because I went to church on Sunday, that Monday, I decided to start writing down some coping skills for myself. And I realized that one of the biggest things for me was to have a spiritual reference. And not having that introduced so many different places for me to venture out to, which is chaotic. And when you don't have order, you do whatever is left.
Right.
And so I started reading more. I started studying more about mental health, trying to diagnose myself, which is wrong.
Right.
For whatever reason, counselors don't like to be counseled sometimes. But eventually, I would say about 2 or 3 weeks later, I started getting into this routine where when I get home, I study. I take a nap, then I eat, and then I'm good to go. But for the most part, it was struggle. I would definitely say I was a little depressed a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
But now, meeting you and then that meeting, I'd probably say I'm in a better place now.
Okay. So you said a couple of things that I think in there that interest me, that I would love to talk a little bit about. Growing up in Durham, because I know I grew up in New York, and in different places in New York, and I had different experiences, but some of those experiences felt challenging. Do you think that where we grow up as children and what we experience young can maybe set our path for mental health? Like, I heard Viola Davis say in a keynote that when you grow up in abject poverty, it affects your mental health. So do you think that the surrounding in Durham made a difference, in your story? Or
For sure, there's a pressure, at least within the Black community, to be perfect.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason I say that is because everything is always a fight when we leave the house. We have to dress a certain way, have to look a certain way. We have to talk a certain way to be accepted.
Mm-hmm. Code switching.
Mm-hmm. And
brought that up.
And if you don't code switch, a lot of the times, because you're already prejudged, there's more judgment that comes with, oh, you're not even educated, or you're not this and not that. And it's like we have to present ourselves as perfect before our mouth even opens. So I think with that type of pressure, leaving the house, we create this idea where I got to make it out. I don't want to be like such and such. I don't want to be like, John from down the street, because the narrative has already kind of been set. So what we grow up doing is we're taught, to rewrite the narrative. So it's pressure to push yourself out there, and trying to be something that you don't even know yet. And this is from a young age. We're talking about maybe 12, 13.
Right.
And you're trying to figure out, what do I want to do in my life early? Because you're already having to deal with the issues of life.
Right.
As an African American.
Right. Right. Very much so.
Yeah.
I want to dig into that code switching a little bit, because I think that is something I've really been pondering this, for several weeks now, about that pressure of code switching when you are a minority, right? And we're celebrating National Minority Mental Health Month. That pressure to code switch, I think that, I don't have the statistics or any other data on it, but I do feel like they could affect our mental health, because I wonder if we are always thinking, will I ever be accepted just for who I am? And in order to be accepted into bigger spaces, right, bigger platforms, like you said, that pressure to be perfect all the time.
Right.
So we do feel that subconscious feeling like I have to coach with it. I have to make my voice maybe a little bit higher, less black sounding. I have to can't use certain words. I remember my mom had a long corporate career in information technology for banking, and growing up in New York, I always get people tell me, you don't sound like you're from New York. And I said, that's because my mom never let us sound like we were. She like drilled that into my brother and my sister and I. We couldn't use slang. We couldn't use different phrases. If I started to say like, the latest catchphrase or whatever, it just was not allowed. And so I think that there was that, I don't know if that's code switching or if that's like intentionally trying not to sound Black, but I do think that can play a part in our mental health.
Yeah, it does. I think we do it with coaching also, but I think we naturally do it as we progress from our adolescence, because we notice things. We're human,
right?
And it's the idea that we don't get to be human when everybody else does. So it's hard to talk about.
Let's keep talking.
But having to perform as a human is difficult because I don't get to live.
You just get to live?
We live, but we're surviving.
All right.
So if you're always in survival mode, at what point do I get to decide or have the space to make a mistake where it doesn't cost me my life? Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. So
is that, do you feel like that's even more prevalent as a Black man? Because Black men's mental health is something that I really find myself wanting to focus more on and think about, right? And talk about.
We don't talk about it. I'm sorry.
Right.
I didn't cut you off.
No.
We don't do that. That's not something we talk about. You might, if your mom is there, you talk to your mom, or your dad, or whatever the case it may be. But we don't really discuss mental health with you as
men in general.
Yeah, men in general.
Okay.
It's like, stand up, keep going, don't cry. And when you don't have that space from your own community, the only space you have is to be tough, strong, always. And if you do have a moment, you need to have it in private. So I think through my own story, I've learned that you're stronger if you can be vulnerable in public rather than hiding all this pain. So for sure, I would say, at least for me, it derived from, I just wanted to make it out.
Right.
So not seeing a lot of people make it. It for me, for sure.
You talked about, you said that word strong, right? I was intentional about wanting to call this podcast Strong Place because even as a Black woman, right, you kind of always hear that term, a strong Black woman. And I want to change the narrative about what makes us strong, how we define strength in our communities, right? Because I don't think that strength, the way we've been taught, right, or the way we've been raised, or even cultured to feel like I think that it's hurting us more than helping us. I don't think that strong in its sense, right, just like in its purest sense, is a bad thing, but we've made it a complex discussion, I think, or topic. One of my favorite scriptures is that I feel like God is always kind of doubling down with me and reminding me as be strong and of good courage, right? And, I feel like God doesn't make mistakes, and, his word is true. So if God is telling me to be strong, but I start to relate being strong to being in pain, how do we change that narrative? How do we get strong back? How do we take that word back to be something that it's okay, and it doesn't feel like we're suffering because we're having to be strong?
So the Bible talks about the process of faith without works is dead.
Mm-hmm.
The works part is part of the most important part of that, because you have to put forth effort. So I think it starts at childhood, where, well, at least for me, talking about race, it started at 5, before you go to school.
Before you go to school.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Don't do this. Be prepared for this. Don't do that. Call me if something happens.
So like a parent or someone almost kind of trying to prepare you for what you might encounter. Okay.
So at 5, you're prepared to be strong.
Especially
I don't get to be
in
a
our
kid.
communities.
Yeah.
I don't just get to be a kid.
I don't get to be a kid. And especially now that, kids don't play outside anymore. We did, bikes.
Right.
Backyard
Playgrounds.
football.
Yeah.
Blacktop.
Mm-hmm.
So now,
hydrants, if you grew up in Brooklyn like me.
right. So now, I would say the best thing we could possibly do is start early. Don't teach fear first. That's what we do. We teach fear first, and it's like, where did it come from? We create that. That's not even something that God gives us.
Right.
So He gives us power, love,
and a strong mind.
right. So
There's that word again, right?
right. So the process of us having those to build on should come out of our mouths first, before we're like, don't do this, don't do that. The first thing you're like, oh, what is going to happen? They're kids. We were kids.
Right.
So we were taught fear first before we were taught strength. We had to learn to be strong to survive. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So if you teach me power first instead of fear, I'll know strength before I know fear. So I have no reason to be afraid because I know strength first. Power. Then teach me love.
About to say that, yeah.
Teach me love so I know what it looks like and I know what it doesn't look like. Then teach me a sound mind, how to think properly, rationally, still have emotions, but not let them be so overbearing that I lose everything in the midst of making decisions. But that's like again I said, that starts at 5, where you're teaching a child fear first. This could happen. That's, you can't tell parents not to teach them that, because it's let's be honest, that's ignorant,
Right.
to do so. But that shouldn't be first. It should be incorporated, but it shouldn't be first.
Right.
First time you tell the child not to do something, that's what they want to do. But adults, we're like that too. We're like, well, why don't you want me to do it? We have this constant idea where we need to know why, and that's not real life. You won't always know why. Sometimes you just have to deal with it as it comes.
Right.
And having power being taught, having love being taught, having been, self-control being taught first to you,
Mm-hmm.
you move different. You think different.
So different.
We didn't move as if we were thinking that way. We moved off of fear.
Mm-hmm.
I just want to survive. I just want to pay my bills.
Right.
Even down to finances. We do stuff out of fear. Won't buy a house. Can't buy a house.
Right.
You can only stay in this community. You need to make this amount of money
Mm-hmm.
to do this. And it's like, what do you actually want to do with your life? It's everything about money. It's everything about for the community. What about yourself?
Mm-hmm.
So, also we have this idea where we have to do stuff for our community. And I'm not saying we don't need to. I'm saying if you're not in a place of strength where you can look at yourself and then be able to pour into somebody else,
Mm-hmm.
then you're not ready yet. So we look to be everything for the Black community, and you can't until you're at a certain place where you're giving them power, not fear.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. I want to go back to the youth thing, because I think
Yeah.
something that you said was so powerful about teaching our kids young. I used to teach 5th grade and 7th grade.
Mm-hmm.
And it just amazed me with the heaviness that the kids would come to school with. And I think it's because of the order in which we teach things. A lot of our kids are just not taught that power, that love, and how to think first. They are taught defend themselves. Can't tell you how many kids told me, my mama said, if somebody did such and such, you know what I mean, hit them back. Or it just seemed like a lot of times the kids would, because they didn't know how to think through, how to love through, how to have that power to process, to relate to others. When they would get frustrated, the first thing they would do is want to fight. They didn't know how to express their emotions in a way that they could resolve conflict without throwing hands.
Right.
And then, you take hormonal little boys between the ages of 5 and 13, like, and it's something that you had said about things in adolescence, you know what I mean? And now, especially I think in the last 8 years since Trayvon, George, Eric, the list kind of unfortunately goes on and on.
Yeah.
Now, Black men not only have to worry about, are you perceived as being human, but you're in survival mode just to make it home to your families.
Yeah.
They've been young, 13-year-old.
Yes, it's difficult for them now, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
From COVID to now, it's like so much has happened.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we just kind of bypassed it because we're not having to wear masks as much anymore. Now it's like a psychological mask. Where we're in a different pandemic where if you don't teach your kids certain things early, they die. And not just physically, emotionally, spiritually, where I think, a lot of the times that's where the Black community goes, which is fine. Spiritually, it's where you should be connected there. You should have a reference point. Right. And I think a lot of times what happens is we're taught what not to do, but not taught how to not do it. So it's rules first and not actually how to live. And it's difficult, especially now, the fight or flight thing for us, I think it's fight. It's not even flight, it's like fight.
Right.
Because we're not going to lie down and take it.
Right.
But there has to be a balance of when that needs to come out and when it doesn't. I'm not saying let people, beat you up and mistreat you all the time, but there has to be some sort of evaluation over the idea that we have to do that first, whether it has to be first. But it's from trauma. There's, just as an example, there's 37-year-olds still dealing with 7-year-old trauma. And it's hard to be an adult if I've never been able to, first of all, be a child.
Right.
And I can't deal with what is still hurting me 20 some odd years later, 30 years later. And it's like, what do you say to them? Well, there's space. But like we were saying before, having the door be open to not just the children, but the parents.
Mm-hmm.
It's the parents that have to teach them.
Right.
But if I'm still dealing with my own trauma, I can't help you correctly outside of trauma responding, giving you trauma responses to deal with your 7-year-old self now.
Right. Right.
So it's a little bit difficult. So it starts from now. I think it starts from the head now, because if you're in a household and it's just, let's say it's 2 kids and you're a single parent, where's the space for you to actually get this help that you actually need to trickle it down to your kids? It's not there.
Now you're in my business. Now you're in my business.
So it's
because I was a single parent of 2 children.
Okay. So it's just difficult. I think as a community we are helpful. I think we just don't know where the help is.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why when I first met you, I was like, we need to do something. We gotta do something. It's getting worse. Shootings here, suicide there, and it's young.
We're losing our children young now. Why does a 10-year-old feel like they don't want to live anymore?
Right. What are you going through at 10?
Right.
That
because you don't feel safe.
Right.
And sometimes I think it's not even that you don't even feel safe in your community, but some of them don't even feel safe at home.
Yeah. So there's that.
So where do you go for the relief? Where, if you don't feel safe at home, you don't feel safe at school. I know for me, like I wasn't raised in church, but I always felt God calling me. Mm-hmm. Always felt like, for whatever reason, just drawn to him. I wanted to know more about him. But I remember my mom not because she didn't want to go to church. So trying to find someone that would take me to church. And so I think God knew I was going to need that safety. He knew I was going to need that as I went through different things as I grew up. But sometimes people don't even feel safe in church, which is the whole other episode, right? Because you and I talked about
the church hurt
and all of that, and that could be a whole other really good conversation, because I do believe that there's safety in God. Sure. But church is just full of people, right? And people hurt people, and hurt people hurt people.
Right.
And so I think a lot of times we're going into church hurt because we're looking, to be healed. But in the meantime, as we're going through that healing process, there's still some hurt in us. And we may, inevitably end up hurting someone. I don't think intentionally, but again, whole other episode.
Yeah.
I want to make sure that I get you an opportunity to just talk about things that you want to do and bring and change that you want to try to make. We've talked about you starting a nonprofit, and because you mentioned about how do we get to the kids and how do we help the children heal if the parents are struggling. Tell me just some about some of the ideas and the solutions you're having, how you think that we serve the whole family in order to help the child.
I think what we discussed was being actually a presence in the school for the parents, so they don't have to have so much responsibility when it comes to actually teaching them. Now I feel like school isn't what it's actually supposed to be.
What do you mean by that?
They're educating them on things they should know for a job, but they're not educating them on things they should know to live and how to make actual sound decisions when it comes to just being balanced emotionally, intelligently. And
do you think that's the school's responsibility?
For sure. They spend most of the time with your kids.
Right.
So it's like you're quick to disown them if they're behavioral issues.
Especially if they're black or brown.
Right. But if they're really intelligent, you're willing to reward them. So why shouldn't the same energy be on that same child who struggles behaviorally? Maybe something is going on. And sometimes the kids who are, very intelligent or doing really well in school are having the same behavior issues. It's just not in school. And we don't know it. And then next thing you know, you're like, oh, what's wrong with such and such? What happened? They were such good kids. And it's too late at that point.
Right.
And then we're trying to scramble. So I think to have a school presence, it shouldn't be on the teachers because the teachers need help too.
Right.
It can't just be on the parents because the teachers spend more time with your kids when they're in school. And it definitely can't just be on the child. So I think it's really a collective thing. I think the idea for me that I had was to be a presence in the school where they have somebody, which would be part of a team, to go to, not just a counselor, because it's one counselor to every student in one grade.
Right. So if you have a grade if you have 300 fifth graders, then that one counselor has to service all 300 of those fifth graders?
Correct.
Wow. So
they're overwhelmed.
It have to be.
And the teachers are probably tired of having to send kids to the counselor and still having to deal with the behavioral or the I don't understand or having emotional problems. I can't sleep at night. I'm not eating.
Is that something new? Because I don't ever recall being in school and there being more than one or two counselors for the whole school. So like when did that
What do you mean
I used to teach, in a school in New Jersey, and we had one school counselor, and so we didn't have one per grade. Is that something more recent that as mental health has become more prevalent and people are talking about it more, that schools are trying to get more counselors?
I believe so. When I was in schools, I think there was a school psychologist and there was 3 other counselors.
Okay.
For the different age groups.
Gotcha.
They may have more than just one grade level. But it was, I only remember 4.
Yeah. Do you think
that's just elementary?
The school systems could put more support to partnering with outside organizations?
Oh, for sure.
Because
taking the pressure off.
Right. Yeah. So, they're not, I don't even know if there's enough counselors to hire like 5 counselors, 6, 10 counselors if you're, a huge school. But I'm just wondering, is there a way that we could be doing things differently? Can we advocate for our legislators to allow the schools to partner with outside agencies to help support our students?
Yeah, I think it's not just partner, it's the funding as well. But the partnership grows as you continue to network.
Right.
The more we network and stop trying to do just individually. Oh, I'm gonna do this by myself. Like, come on, we're a community. The whole idea is to create space for people to be able to live and not just survive it, or get out of this routine where, oh, I can only go to school, I can only do this, or go to work and just do that, because I explained to you how difficult that is. And I can imagine how teachers are feeling when they have to go to school and they have to not just be the counselor, but the teacher for 30 kids. That's a lot.
Sometimes 35.
Yeah, so that's a lot that you're asking them for. I definitely think we should connect with our legislation and provide some type of program where it's an outsource within the schools, where when you drop your child off, you know they're good. I think the idea is that we were talking about earlier is we don't always know that our kids are good, which is why we teach fear first.
Right.
So if there's a program that doesn't allow that to be the census, the narrative, I think that's where it starts.
Yeah.
If we're in schools, they don't have to drop them off. They don't have to leave work early. They don't have to be too concerned. And also the help is there for them. Helping the parents not be so overwhelmed, especially if they're a single mom or single dad, because there's those. So I think just us having a presence in the school, more counselors as a contract, or
Right.
just a part of just being a counselor. I think it should be made like a rule
Right.
for us to be, if you're a counselor, this is what you have to do, this amount of hours, to support just our community, because we're not the only ones suffering. And sometimes I feel like we operate like that as a community, where we're a little selfish, where we get things done, but that's it. There's no, and then when you're looking for the help, you don't have it, because this whole time you've been practicing just individual, what matters for me,
Right.
and not just as a whole.
So kind of like maybe collective economics, but also collective care,
Correct.
within our communities. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for this. How do you think ultimately we create stronger communities by redefining what it means to be strong?
Starts at home. Obviously, there needs to be a healing process. You don't want to grow with unhealed pain, because you're stuck there. So it's three things that we live by, actually, and we don't really probably talk about it as much. So deliverance is one, and that can be from your pain, from your struggle, from your trauma. Then development. The development stage is what we struggle at, and we get lost at a lot of times, because you have to do the work. You have to take out the time, provide the space to grow, to work out those areas that aren't so weak. I think one time I was just spending some time with God, and one of the things that he told me was to love from my weak place. And to love from your weak place means I have to not rely on my strength so much. So when it comes time for me to use a different tool, it's not weak. I'm able to develop that and be strong there. So when I need it, I can use it. And then it's destiny. And once you get to your destiny, you use all the things that you learn. You remember the pain, you remember the deliverance stage, but that's not your reference point anymore, because you've made it.
Right.
So once you get to the destiny stage, you just keep going. There shouldn't necessarily be not be goals. You should have goals. But once you reach your goals, what do? You make another one.
Right.
So don't limit yourself. The process of life has a lot to do with how we treat ourselves and also how we treat others. So what comes out of you is who you actually are.
Right. Absolutely.
That's who you are.
Mm-hmm.
So you got to do the work.
Right. You know a tree by the fruit it bears.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to have fruit, though.
Right.
So it really starts at home with yourself.
Yeah, and you have to have roots, right?
Right.
Because a tree has to have roots.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that those roots are at home.
It's good to remember where you come from. It's always good to remember where you come from. Because a lot of times the problem is when you forget, you cancel out the importance of where you're going. Destiny's purpose has a purpose. Destiny is a purpose because you had deliverance from wherever you were. There would be no purpose for destiny if there was no deliverance at all. The middle part, you know, you can call it a gray area, is where the emotional growth happens, where you change a little bit, and you should. Change is good. Change used to be scary, but
Right. Change is good.
It's a wonderful thing because I think my father used to tell me all the time, you can't get to heaven unless you die. So yeah,
That's good.
so
Shout out to your pastor, father, right?
yeah. Oh, I didn't mention that. Yeah, my parents are pastors, and when he would say that, he would, you know, put oil on our heads every morning before we leave out. Wake up oily. I'm like, what's going on here?
Greased up. And
Right, greased up. I'm like, dang, you try to push back in your hair. So when he told us that, it just stayed there. The process of understanding that something has to be done away with in order for you to see what you need to see. The new light, the new change, the new door, wherever it is, you have to die there first. Leave it. Let it go. It's not as easy. That's why the work needs to be done. But deliverance, development, destiny.
I love it.
Yeah.
I love it. Thank you, Chris, for joining me today.
Happy to be here.
I really enjoyed our conversation. I'm gonna be feeding on that for a minute.
Okay.
Deliverance,
Development,
destiny. Amen. Amen. Well, we have concluded our episode today of Strong Place. You can find this episode on Mental Health America's YouTube channel. MHAofCC.org is our website. And you can follow us also on Facebook and Instagram at Mental Health America of Central Carolinas.